Washington Football Maniacs.
Okay. So, all right. I know that there were fans out there who really thought that the Commanders had an opportunity, had a chance to beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football. And I will tell you that I honestly, in that first half, made me feel like, you know what, maybe we do have a bit of a chance. But, I kept telling my wife as I was sitting there watching the first half, I was like, this team should have already put up 21 points on the board right now. I realized that Jaden Daniels wasn't playing, but at the same time, we had a quarterback in there who was more than competent to be able to move the ball down the field, score some points, that sort of thing. But Washington kind of just shot themselves in the foot every single time they got to a point to where it was, 4th and 1, 4th and inches, whatever, 3rd and 1, could not get could not convert for a first down, couldn't get the first down, and that really hurt them. Turnovers on downs hurt Washington. Turnovers, interceptions, things like that. Now, then again, you look at Kansas City and you saw, okay, well, Mahomes came out, didn't play very well, threw a couple of picks. One was just an outstanding pick by Marshawn Lattimore. The other one, of course, was a tipped pass from Kelsey. And Washington, of course, I think it was Bobby Wagner was the one who came up with the interception. Not really necessarily on Mahomes, of course, but yet through 2 picks, Kansas City was giving Washington opportunities, and Washington could not capitalize on those opportunities. Even with that being said, they go into halftime. They made a good stop on Kansas City at the end of the first half. The score is 7-7. And, if you're a Washington fan, you're feeling pretty good about this, but you also realize that first drive of the second half is extremely important for your defense. Your defense needs to be able to stop Kansas City, because if they allow Kansas City to move the ball down the field and punch it in, it's going to be tough, because now suddenly you're having to get into a shootout to keep up with Kansas City, and that's not the game. That is not the game plan that the Commanders or anybody else should ever get into if they're going to be winners over Kansas City. Well, what happened? I believe that was the drive in which there was a boneheaded personal foul call. I believe was it on Quan Martin? I believe it was. Uncalled for, late hit, spearing. I don't know, targeting. I don't know exactly how they called it, but it was definitely a personal foul call, which kept the drive going. And that was such a shame, because I really felt like Washington had a very strong opportunity to stall that drive and force a punt, get the ball back, and actually be in an opportunity to drive the football down the field and take the lead. But it didn't happen. Kansas City kept the ball meticulously, methodically, moved the football down the field, and suddenly, Kansas City starts heating it up. And I remember saying something, and I was like, this is where we start getting carved up. Now, my wife looked at me like, why can't you be positive? I'm like, at this point, positivity, negativity has nothing to do with it. It's the realism of having watched Kansas City play time and time again, and also kind of knowing how Washington, when they get into a situation like this against a really good team, things kind of start caving in. And that's exactly what happened. And of course, after that, Kansas City never really looked back. Washington couldn't, they couldn't move the football down the field, kept turning the ball over, whatever it was. At that point, especially when Kansas City went up by 14 points, you knew the game was over. As a matter of fact, I think I I think I shut the game off after Marcus Mariota took that sack. It was 21-7. Washington was trying to drive, and then Mariota took a bad sack, and I was like, "That's it. That's it." I had to get to bed because I had to get up super early the next day, and I had just gotten back from a trip from Tennessee, and so naturally I was exhausted. Staying up and watching the rest of the game, which was not much left really. I mean, it was another Kansas City score, and that was it. I think there was another turnover by Washington's offense there, and really that was about it of the ball game. Here are the things, of course, that as a fan, when you're watching the game, you of course it just eats you up. And you've never been able to understand this, but the fact of the matter is, if there were any halftime adjustments that were made by Washington's defense, is it defense or defense? um, it was the wrong decision because it looked like that Washington was playing a little bit more man in the first half. And because of that, I think they were able to rush Mahomes. They were they were pressuring Mahomes pretty good in that first half. I mean, I think Kansas City had a couple of tackles that were out and injured, and so this was the time for Washington to really. I know it's Patrick Mahomes, but you've got to rush him, but you also got to maintain lane integrity. You can't allow him to get outside of the pocket. Once you do, you're toast. That's what started happening with Kansas City, but also Washington looked like they started playing more zone defense. And so when you're not getting the pressure to Mahomes, and Mahomes is able to escape out of the pocket, then a zone defense, he's going to pick you apart all day long. And that's exactly what started to happen. He started getting, um, passes to Kelsey, Pacheco, um, Rice. I mean, just he was carving up that defense in the second half. And so I'm not sure. I'm not sure what adjustments were being made, but they were not the right adjustments from what it looked like as a fan perspective. And I'm always having to put that disclaimer in because I realize I don't coach football. I'm not around the team. And this is solely from my perspective of how I watched the game. And how I watched the game, it looked like Kansas City made the right adjustments. Washington could not counter adjust to keep up with the adjustments that Kansas City had. And plus, again, it felt like I don't think that Kansas City really did anything different in the second half. I just think they were starting to execute a little bit better because, you know, zone defense against Mahomes, Mahomes going to burn you probably 99% of the time. With all that being said, now you look at a team that's 3-5. Obviously, this is not a team that's going to make the playoffs this year, folks. Now, I realize that there are a lot of people who are like, wait, Matt, we only lost 5 games last year. We could win the rest of our games and be 12-5. Yeah, you could, but you won't. I mean, that's just let's look at this realistically. This team is not going to win the rest of our football games this season. I don't care if everybody is healthy. It's just not going to happen. Why am I being so negative about this? Well, for one thing, there's not been continuity on either side of the football this entire season because of injuries, whatever it is, there's not been continuity. And there's been something that's been off about this team from the get go. And because of that, you're not going to see a team that came in 2024 and just ate up everybody. The only adversity they had in 2024 was, I think it was like a 3-game skid. And after that, they won pretty much the rest of their ball games. That's not going to happen this year. Yes, we have another 3-game skid. Guess what? We also had like, what was it? A 2-game skid here and there. And suddenly, the team's, 5 losses in with only 8 games having been played. Now you're in the mid part of the season. You're playing Seattle. Seattle has been honestly surprisingly good to me. Now, they're well coached, but surprisingly good because they don't really have what I consider a superstar quarterback. Sam Darnold, I believe it's Sam Darnold who's playing, um, but he's played really well. And I think also the defense has played really well for Seattle. And he McDonald's got that team playing football that really should be played. And it's going to be very tough for Washington to beat them. Now, I think that if any of these hard games in the stretch that Washington will wind up stealing a win from would probably will be Seattle. Um, I feel like Jaden Daniels will be back. Of course, Terry McLaurin is back. Debo Samuel's back. We're getting emergence of Luke McCaffrey, who has started to make some plays almost every single game, whether if it's special teams or if he goes out there and he catches a, um, yeah, you know, chain moving catch on third down, a crucial catch on the sideline or whatever. Luke McCaffrey has really started to emerge as a solid wide receiver. And we really don't have a lot to worry about on offense if that's the case, if Jaden Daniels is back. What I am worried about, of course, with left tackle Laramie Tunsil, who has a hamstring issue, he may be out. That's tough. It seems like every single game this year, there's been a very key player for Washington that's gotten hurt. Either it's been season-ending injury or at least an injury that keeps them out for 1 to 4 games, and so that's tough. That's those things are very tough to come back from. And so if Jaden is in there against Seattle, they're going to have to. It's likely they go without Laramie Tunsil, and that's going to be tough. It's really going to be difficult for Washington. Um, so Coleman would likely be the left tackle there, and he's going to have to perform. He's going to have to fill some big shoes. So there's always adversity, no matter what. There's always adversity. And I think that's just going to be the theme throughout this season for Washington. It's just going to be a season lost, unfortunately. It was already going to be a tough season with the schedule as it was. And honestly, I think if Washington was going to repeat winning 12 games this year with the schedule that they had, then I would probably tell you at that point that if this team didn't make the Super Bowl, it was going to be a big disappointment because I would expect them to go all the way if they won 12 games with the type of schedule they had this year. A lot of people looked at the schedule despite what happened last year and said, you know what? They win 10 games. They're going to be fantastic. They're going to be just fine if they win 10 games this year. It was hard to fathom the thought. You mean they're taking a step back? But look at the schedule last year compared to this year. Big difference. Washington right now, they don't have a lot of easy games. I'm looking at the schedule and see easy games. Maybe the Miami game, but guess what? That's overseas, so different time zone, different schedule. As far as it just really messes up your internal clock, and those games are always tough. Because you're not playing if it's a 1 o'clock game anywhere else. Like if it's a 1 o'clock game in Madrid or Germany or London or anything like that, it's an early game for the United States, which means that clock, that schedule for the football players, it's all messed up. So that's something you have to contend with. And that's just kind of a natural thing that is also something to think about. So I say all that to say that don't take the Miami game lightly either, because that may be a game that you really leave that game thinking, wow, this team is sunk this year. Now we will get into. Um, I'll save this for another video, but we will get into why did this all happen? Other than a tough schedule and injuries, why has Washington had such a hard time this year? We'll talk about that in another video, but thank you for hearing me ramble. If you agree with any of this stuff, please, hey, throw me a thumbs up there. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on everything. With that said, I will see you in the next one.